Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Ruben, for the invitation. So I want to just cover a couple of three points. First of all, one of the things that I can sort of speak with a good amount of knowledge is my experience over the past 4 years and ultimately over the past 12 years. Really, I'm not really speaking as a successful social entrepreneur, just as one that's been working on a big social entrepreneurship project for the last 3.5 years, and I've had the luxury of surviving, and it looks like at least surviving another year. So from that perspective, I'll just share 3 stories that people thinking about solving bigger problems might find a little bit of motivation from. And then happy to sort of help out in any way for those of you that are working on similar problems. The first thing, so to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in Western New York and went to college and studied computer science before I failed out, and then ended up getting an economics degree. And it was during the dot-com boom, and it was back when, if you could write some code and speak intelligently in an interview, you'd get a pretty good job. So my first job was with a consulting firm that was owned by Dell Computer, which basically meant that I spent the first 3 years of my career working at Dell Computer on various projects. And it was a good job. I mean, if you grew up in sort of rural America and you had a good job and you were a knowledge worker, it's generally success. And then a couple of things happened right around that time. The first was I was staffed on a project in New York City, and just so happens that I was kind of a scared flyer. And I flew into New York City, and on the plane, on the airport, I was writing in my journal. I write in a journal periodically for the last 20 years that, I'm becoming less and less scared flying. And I landed roughly 1 in the morning, went to my hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, and that morning was September 11th, 2001. I was there. I was walking to my office that morning. I saw the North Tower fall. And that's probably when the seed was planted as to wanting to do something more meaningful. And then when you're in that situation, it's been sort of covered a lot, and most of us have had our stories. But for me personally, I started to think about, do I want to be a software engineer forever? And in particular, I was working on some insurance exchange stuff. So that was the first seed that was planted. And the second seed that was planted was I became my mom's legal guardian, and she's permanently disabled. And so I started to see problems in sort of the human services industry. And so during that period of time, I went through a series of exercises, kind of on my own, either through journaling or whatever, and you're sort of faced with a choice. Sort of I want to grow up and be a software developer. That for me, that wasn't very important. What was important was, I was really interested in public policy, so I actually mapped out a quadrant to talk about the public policy interests. And as we choose our careers, there's one argument in which I subscribed to for a good period of time was that, the best thing I can do is save and be very careful. And I did that for a good period of time. But I've asked a lot in terms of, well, how do you sort of get involved in these issues? And there is a lot of sacrifice in order to do that. And in particular, the analogy that I used was you need to think about the right building that you want to be in. And for me, it wasn't insurance. It wasn't selling computers. It wasn't anything like that. But it was public policy. So I went back to the LBJ school. I applied at around that same period of time, was late, and somehow figured out a way to get in. And coincidentally enough, my first job after graduate school was in this building, which is kind of ironic. I was a business analyst with the city of Austin. I actually worked in the agenda office, what the agenda office is responsible for is organizing the agenda of city council meeting, which coincidentally takes place in this room. So it's kind of thick with irony there. But the best thing about that decision was after graduate school, I received 2 job offers. One was to go back to Dell as basically a project manager, and the other one was to come here. Of course, the choice to come here was not necessarily good pay, but it was a chance to work with the city manager of Austin and a chance to work with some really interesting and smart people and seeing how government actually starts to work. So my first bit of advice for sort of young social entrepreneurs is to choose the right building. You can still work to get your financial situation right by choosing the right building. Sometimes we justify to ourselves, well, I have some accounting skills, I'll stay with a private firm, and then maybe I can move over to accounting in a different industry, an industry that I'm more passionate about. That's absolutely true, but it's very tempting when you do that. It's very tempting to sort of get used to that lifestyle, and that's when people find themselves trapped. So I think one thing that I'm proud of is that I did choose the right building, and it's led to a career in government and public policy, and that's been my life the last 12 years. The second thing I would say is we all sort of have the interest in doing things more meaningful is to work on problems that big problems that matter. I was a contractor with the Texas Health and Human Services Commission for 4 years, and we were responsible for making it easier for people to apply for and get enrolled in the food stamp program, Medicaid, temporary assistance to needy families. And it was a pretty intense project in Austin, certainly Texas, from 2006 through 2010. And as part of my role, I was responsible for reporting and analysis and generally finding problems within the operation and recommending technology solutions to fix those problems. And for a brief period of time, I managed the quality control department of the call center. So the state has a call center that you call every time you have a question about your food stamp benefits or your Medicaid benefits. And so one day, I flew up to Midland, Texas, where the call center was at the time. Still there, but there's 3 of them now. And I actually listened to calls. And I heard, it was during 2008, during the housing crisis, economic downturn was happening. And at the time, a woman had called. She was from Houston, Texas, and she had filled out all of her paperwork for the renewal of her food stamps on time. And then she called and she asked a question. She said, hey, I received a letter that says that my application requires an interview, but that interview isn't scheduled for another month. And the reason why that interview wasn't scheduled for another month was because there were so many people applying for food stamps that the state just did not have enough workers to do the interviews. So the woman asked a really good question after that. She said, well, what am I supposed to do in the interim period between when the time my food stamps expired to now? To when this interview takes place. And the call center agent explained politely, and it's really, the agent was doing the best she could do. She said, well, my only advice is find the nearest food pantry. So I started thinking about what is the user experience of people trying to find charities in government services. So that's a problem that I became obsessed with since that happened in 2010. And then I started AuntBertha.com, which is a search engine that makes it easy for people to find and apply for government and charitable services. And then when you think about it, the commitment that was made during that period of time wasn't to do a social startup, and it really isn't the commitment now. It's to work on this problem. And I foreseeable future, there's a lot of problems in human services delivery. There's a lot of great things that have happened in technology, certainly over the last 20 years. But it's the ability to commit yourself for the rest of your career. So I made a commitment that I want to work on these problems for the rest of my career. And doors have opened up since then. The last part about it is sort of the last part of the journey is actually going ahead and starting the business. And so at the time, I had some money saved, and I wanted to do some creative writing. This was before I had the idea for Aunt Bertha. And I had a little bit of money stored away, and I decided, heck, I'm going to go for it. And went to actually Tech Ranch here in Austin, some shared office space, and had a chance to have some conversations with the founder, Kevin. I had a chance to meet with Gary Hoover in Austin and several other people, and the resounding sort of chorus was just start building stuff, just start building stuff. And so I started writing code and started to actually build sort of the first product. And during that period of time, pretty much 2011, I launched the first search in 2011. We got a little bit of users. In fact, it was so bad early on, I could barely convince my friends to use it. which was amazing because they would answer the questions, but then they wouldn't register, which is like, come on, guys. You know, I've been working on this for 6 months, at least register. But I learned an important lesson. People don't want to register. So especially, that was also a very important lesson on privacy. People want to be anonymous when they're saying very vulnerable things like, I need help, you know. And so that launched, and since then, we've had a good amount of users. We track everything that's searched, and we started analyzing the search data, and we started to see some pretty amazing things. One, thousands of these happen per day. Hundreds of thousands of searches have happened since we started. Things like, you know, looking for a counselor, and we later learned that they were also searching for cancer. So you're in that situation, you find out you have cancer. After you've talked to the doctors, your head is swimming. Who do you talk to after that? And so people have done searches like that. Other searches are you're looking for addiction help, and then you later learn that you're addicted to meth. And those are the types of searches. And the most recent, one of the ones that I found most interesting is we saw some searches in Richmond, Virginia, presumably a woman who is searching for tampons. And although there's call centers that exist to help with these sorts of things, even those of us that see ourselves as middle class that may be going through a hard time, it's very difficult to admit to another human being that you're so broke that you can't afford tampons. And so that's why I think anonymous search is important, and that there needs to be alternatives to call centers, and we need to encourage anonymity in this process, and we need to encourage people to empower themselves. One of those late nights in the fall of 2011, I was working past midnight and kind of feeling sorry for myself. There I was, fighting the good fight, also trying to raise money and just working too hard, trying to do everything myself and with my small team. And at the time, as we were learning from our users, we had a little chat window that would show up. And that chat window, after somebody had been on our site for more than a minute, it would be a little chat window with Aunt Bertha saying, "Hey, sugar, can I help you with anything?" And every now and then people would chat. And the way it worked is if one of us were signed in, then we got the chat. We're integrated with our email system. So a woman, I said, "How can I help you?" She said, "I found out about your site from my caseworker. I like it. I've been able to use it here in Austin. But do you have any programs in the Galveston area?" And she said, my grandparents are in the Galveston area. And at the time, we weren't rolled out in the Galveston area yet, but she actually already did some searches there, so our search actually worked in the Galveston area. And I'll end with this. She was looking for help for her grandparents. She was looking for utility assistance, and she was also looking for pest control. So here was a woman in Austin that didn't have any money herself. She didn't have an ability to drive to Houston to help her grandparents, but she had a phone and she had a car. A phone and time. And so she was able to find those services, and she was able to help her grandmother, and it empowered her to do that. As you're thinking through and thinking about which building that you want to be in, find a really big problem worth solving, you're going to have moments where you're going to look around and you're going to think, it's just me. I feel like a kid wearing grown-up clothes, and it just happens. That's okay. You're never ready to do it. What's most important is that you understand that you are a kid in grown-up clothes, but the world needs more kids in grown-up clothes, because the world needs you, because somebody in Richmond can't find tampons. Thank you.